Okay, so let's talk about the snatch. Specifically, how to pull under and get into your overhead squat with control, quickly, and with a lot of stability overhead. I find that the snatch, for a lot of people, the full snatch I'll say, is the most challenging because it requires a lot of stability overhead, especially with that wide grip. It requires a lot of mobility in the lower limbs and in the upper back to help maintain a really upright torso. So if you don't naturally have some of these attributes, then we really got to work on it. And that I find is usually the limiting factor for people being able to snatch more weight, is they are unable to get into a really effective overhead squat position quickly and then eventually under more load. I have a PVC pipe with me today. We're gonna look at a couple of different skills that can help you improve your pull under the bar into the squat snatch. The first thing we're gonna start off with is the barbell in our snatch grip. Okay, shoulders should be nice and relaxed, elbows are straight, and the bar is resting across your hip flexors. Your knuckles are going to be tucked under just slightly, right? So we're not here pushing the bar away from us, we're sweeping it in close to our body. The first thing I want to assess in somebody struggling with pulling under the bar is their shoulder internal range of motion. So you can do that separately, but we're going to do it within the confines of the actual lift. So with that snatch grip, I'm going to have you stand up nice and tall, legs are locked out, chest is up, and you're going to pull elbows as high as you can and try to get that bar or that PVC pipe to your chest. So this is the phase where I start to notice, is somebody limited in that range of motion? Maybe they're doing something like this, where the elbows stop elevating and the wrists are starting to tuck under. Is one more internally rotated than the other? Maybe it looks something like this. And that requires a separate protocol and assessment. But assuming that you can get into a really nice snatch grip, high pull position, right? Elbows high, bars close to the body. We'll do a few here, right? Let's just strengthen this position. And you can do it with a PVC pipe, then graduate to a technique bar, and then later to a regular bar, and maybe start adding some weight. But this range of motion is super duper important to get you under the weight. The next thing we're gonna do is a muscle snatch. So if we can get here, then we want to make sure we understand where we're going after that. A lot of times I'll see people get here okay, and then they do this, right? And create a lot of space between the bar and their heads. We want to think about continuing the elbows up and back, and as you turn, that bar should stay nice and close to your head as you punch up, right? So you notice I got to my peak height, and then instead of staying there and just swinging the bar away from me, I started to drop the elbows and press up on the bar, because that is what's happening when you are squatting underneath the weight, right? When we're moving under the bar, at a certain point, the elbows stop elevating, they turn under, and then they punch up. If the elbows stay the same height, the only thing you can do is swing forward, okay? So that's part two. Next, can we overhead squat? Can the athlete overhead squat? So in the overhead squat, I am looking for the bar balanced over the back of the shoulders. It's not excessively back behind you, so if you're hypermobile, you have to find where that middle ground is. It's also not out here. And then we also want to talk about rib positioning. This is generally really challenging for people and will require some work. When they're overhead, we don't want this. Big archy back, rib cage up. We're going to think tailbone down, rib cage reaching down. Find that position, squeeze into the bar, and pull tension apart. So it's like I'm trying to pull the PVC pipe apart. My shoulder blades are pulled down my back, but I'm actively locking out by squeezing my triceps. From here, I'm going to squat. So the important part is, can I maintain that position with the bar? Do I have to arch my back a lot? Do I completely relax in the bottom of my squat? Where am I in regards to that? So we've assessed those first 3 points, right? Do they have enough internal rotation to keep the bar close? Do they know how to turn under the bar with just their arms? We're not even looking at the rest of the body yet. Do they know what the arms are supposed to do? Elbows up, elbows tuck under, press up. Can they get into a good overhead squat? So if all those are there, we're going to start to put it together a little more dynamically. So the first thing I like to do is something I call a muscle tall snatch. It's a great warm-up drill. It's very similar to this tall snatch, but we're not going to move the feet, we're not going to jump. So you're starting with your feet already in your squat stance. From here, I want you to start to descend your body as you ascend your arms with the bar. From here, up. So that I get used to again, as I get under the bar, I press straight up. Again, this is when you can start with a PVC pipe, graduate to a technique bar, eventually to a full-size bar. The next thing we're gonna do is start to add some footwork to this with a regular tall snatch. So my feet are just starting a little bit narrower. I'm starting in that same upright, tall, locked out position. We're not dipping, we're not adding any extra variables yet. And we're gonna try to do the same thing, but this time your feet will shuffle out and you'll dynamically drop into that squat. Here, tall, back down. The arms are doing the same thing. Right, all my feet did was shuffle and I sit. If you notice that you lost control of the bar at some point in that variation, go back to this slower muscle version so you can really ingrain how to sit and pull yourself under. The last thing I would start to do with this is something called a dip snatch, where we're just adding a little bit of dynamic opening and closing of the hip to give some more momentum onto the bar and thus make the movement more complex and more like the actual snatch. So I'm going to start with my feet under my hips, same locked out position, and then I'm going to dip into my power position. Let's review that really quickly. Upper back is tight, shoulder blades are pulled down, elbows are turned out to the side, feet are flat. You're going to bend your knees, push your butt back a little bit, and shoulders are just slightly over the bar. It doesn't have to be dramatic. We're not all the way out here. We just want to cover it a little bit. So I'm going to quickly, without losing tension, get into this position. You'll notice I didn't relax the bar down. I don't want to come super low where the bar hangs down my body. I'm also not relaxing my shoulders as I get into that dip. Dip, pull under. Dip, under. So that's how we can start to piece things together, right? We start with slow, mechanical, movement-based assessments of where you're at, right? Can we get into this position? Do you know how to pull under and tuck the elbow through? Do we need to work on your overhead squat mobility? That might be a factor. And then we start to get more dynamic. If you try to skip steps and go straight ahead, chances are you will become really, really strong doing something like this. And then it's a really hard habit to break. So I always recommend start with the basics, start with positional foundations, make sure you have mastery of the slow, the steady, and the still before you start to move on to dynamic things.